This empty chair represents the addict who died today, not knowing recovery was possible.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of The Empty Chair. This is a podcast for the addict that did not know that recovery was possible. Tonight, we're here to bring awareness and education to gambling. I don't know if many people know, but March is Gambling Awareness Month. And right now, there is a lot of individuals struggling with this. And part of MVP ASAP, part of our purpose is to just bring attention to other types of addictions because they all do coincide with each other, as we will hear tonight from these two amazing men that are here with us. First and foremost, I know I must look weird because I don't have my partner in crime with me. And I just want to say hi, Phil and Fran. I love you both, and I miss you tonight. And payback is a bitch, and I will get you. So again, March is Gambling Awareness Month, and just some statistics in regards to gambling is 2% of Massachusetts adult population are problem gamblers. About 75% of our college students gambled this past year, with 18 gambling weekly or more frequently. From Boston to Springfield, treatment clinics are experiencing an influx of young people as young as the age of 14. These 14-year-olds are seeking help for gambling problems, and that's a shame. That's hard to see. So we are creating the conditions of a future public health crisis in the same way that the Sackler family did with OxyContin. So tonight I have two amazing men here that are going to talk how they turned their mess into a very positive message this evening. But before I start, I just want to throw out like the 20 questions that an individual would ask themselves to, and if you don't have to answer all of them, but most of them, to see if you do have an issue with gambling. So do you ever lose time from work or school due to gambling? Has gambling ever made your home life unhappy? Did gambling affect your reputation? Have you ever felt remorse after gambling? Did you ever gamble to get money with which to pay debts or otherwise solve financial difficulties? Did gambling cause a decrease in your ambition or efficiency? After losing, did you feel you must return as soon as possible and win back your losses? After a win, did you have a strong urge to return and win more? Did you often gamble until all your money was gone? Did you ever borrow to finance your gambling? Have you ever sold anything to finance gambling? Were you reluctant to use gambling money for normal expenditures? Did gambling make you careless of the welfare of yourself or your family? Did you ever gamble longer than you had planned? Have you ever gambled to escape worry, trouble, boredom, loneliness, grief, or loss? Have you ever committed or considered committing an illegal act to finance gambling? Did gambling cause you to have difficulty in sleeping? Do arguments, disappointments, or frustrations create within you an urge to gamble? Did you ever have an urge to celebrate any good fortune by a few hours of gambling? And number 20 is, have you ever considered self-destruction or suicide as a result of your gambling? So tonight sits before me two amazing men who have turned their lives around. Kenny began gambling at age 13, and he sits before us tonight with 26 years without a bet. And Jay, after 40 years of reckless gambling, found recovery in 2021. So thank you both for being here. Thank you for traveling as far as you did and for shedding light to this subject. So Kenny, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how does one get into gambling at age 13?
Yeah, thanks for having this show and shining a bright light on it. So at 13, I never wanted to do anything for fun. I wanted to always have action on the line. And at that time, it was dollars, and anything that I thought I could control the outcome of, and sports related, ping pong, bowling, pool, basketball, darts. And kids would always say to me, can't you just do anything for fun? And it was more fun if there was action on it.
Okay.
So chronologically, I went back in time when I wrote out a step 4, gave it away in a 5, and I came to the conclusion that it was 13, because at 10, I wasn't doing that, but at 13, I was.
Yes. Was there any gambling in your house where your parents gamblers, or any type of addiction that gave you that kind of drive where it has to be more exciting and just not being able to do something for the enjoyment of?
So my parents, their moderation.
Okay.
Very occasionally, I would go to the dog track with my father and my grandfather, and my dad could go with $10 and come back with $5. He'd buy a program, buy a hot dog, watch a couple races, entertain my grandfather, but everything that my parents have always done has been moderation. So for me, I don't know where it stems from. I thought it was bad behavior, and today I realize I wanted something for nothing.
Okay. Yeah. So can you explain to us, like from age 13, how it started with the adrenaline of you needed to do more, to where did it take you? How did you hit your bottom? And most importantly, how did you find recovery?
So I kicked around Gamblers Anonymous from 1989 till 1998, and in and out. So my last bet was December 27, 1998, and that particular, I had thousands of last bets. I quit every day, multiple times a day. And for whatever reason, driving home from, I was at the New York Jet Patriot game. And to give you an idea of the timeline, Scott Zolak was the quarterback. Okay. And I didn't have the game. I stayed away from the local teams because I thought that was me showing control of my gambling. So I stayed away from the Patriots, the Red Sox, the Celtics, I didn't really gamble on hockey. And that particular drive home, I had pulled over. My wife was a passenger, a friend of mine was driving, and this was no cell phone era. So we pulled over to a payphone on that stretch of McDonald's, and I needed to get a bet in, and it would happen to be my last bet. And I called 3 bookmakers to make one particular bet. One bookmaker said, "You're shut off." One bookmaker said, "I'll take all of what you want to play." And one bookmaker said, "I'll take a piece of it." And that was the last bet that I made. And I didn't go to a meeting. I lost that bet. And I didn't go to a meeting that week and the following Sunday, which was the first. My last bet was December 27th, but my first meeting back was that first Sunday of January of 98.
So can you explain your bottom? Like, what was it? A large amount of money? Did your wife know what you were doing? Did you ever lose a home? Did you ever lose a business? How extreme did you get with your gambling? And if you can just elaborate on that in regards to, like,
Sure.
I love these questions that we
Yeah,
had.
I was convinced that it was a financial problem, and today I don't believe it is.
Okay.
But at that time, I was convinced it was. I had to sell my car, and I had to drive a more inferior car. Yeah. I still had my job. My wife and I were still married, still had a home. I had maxed out 7 credit cards. I had 3 bookmakers looking to get paid. And I didn't think any dollar I would ever earn again would be mine. And that fed the gambling, because I was convinced that I was on a bad run and that it was going to turn around for me. Okay. And when I went back to Gamblers Anonymous, after having been, I was away for maybe 4 or 5 years. And I spoke at the meeting, and when it was my turn to speak, I was more pissed off that I was there. I felt like I was in a room with a bunch of losers. Yep. And I was there to punish myself. And the healthiest people I know are in recovery today. I know that, but I didn't know it at the time. Yep. And somebody took me under their wing, and they showed me where I could go Monday night was Newton, Tuesday night was Curry College, Wednesday night was Avon, Thursday night was the Rentham State School, Friday was Watertown, Saturday was Quincy, Sunday was, East Boston. So I just went to meetings. The suggestion is 90 meetings in 90 days, and that's what I did. I took the meetings as serious as I took the gambling.
And I had asked you a little bit about AA to see if that was something that you participated in. Neither one of you have an addiction problem for alcohol, but you did say you went to an AA meeting. Are the numbers as high in regards to the people in a meeting? Are these small meetings? Are there large people that are going to GA right now?
The meetings are much smaller.
Okay.
There's 6,000.
Smaller because of COVID, or just smaller meetings?
No, just smaller of awareness.
Okay.
There's probably in the neighborhood of 30 to 40 meetings a week in Massachusetts. COVID certainly has taken a toll on that, and there's online opportunity. But there's thousands of AA meetings a week. And so I speak at a treatment facility, and it's for alcoholism and drug addiction, and my topic is gambling.
Awesome.
So there's a lot of countertransference, there's substitution, and what people do is they put down a drink and they pick up a bet, so I speak on awareness about that.
Awesome. And how often do you do that?
Every Friday.
Good for you. And that's what we call giving back. That's part of your service.
Correct.
All right, I'm going to jump over to you for a little bit, young man. So tell us a little bit about how did you get involved in gambling? Where did it take you? And how did it get you to where you're at today?
Well, similar to Ken's story, I started gambling at a young age. For me, I was probably a sophomore or junior in high school. And I remember we would have card games. And for me, the gambling started with cards. I had the unfortunate experience of winning a lot of money for a sophomore or junior in high school. And I remember, it's interesting, I remember my grandmother saying to my mom at one point, "I'm worried about Jay. I worry that he might have a problem with this." And I think we didn't recognize it, my parents or anybody, because nobody in the family gambled. Shortly after being exposed to playing cards, I had a friend introduce me to the opportunity of betting on sports. And playing sports all my life, it was very appealing to me. And also the fact that I had won, initially as an early person in high school, I thought, wow, this is a great way that I could make money. And I got introduced to a bookie, started betting with the bookie. One of the 20 questions, did you ever sell anything to finance your gambling? At 19, I had to give my car to the bookie, who took it to a chop shop, chopped the car to get the money that I owed. And having a father that's a craftsman and works with his hands and very frugal, that was not a very good conversation. And what's interesting to me is it didn't stop me. I just kept going and kept going. And that went on for 40 years until November of 21, when I put down the bet and committed myself to the GA program.
Amen. So can you guys define what's gambling? You keep saying sports. Is that what gambling is we bet on sports?
It happens to be my main gambling of choice. But I also like playing craps at the casino.
Okay.
I would rarely bet anything lottery-wise. I'd go to the track a few times a year. That wasn't really my gambling of choice. But what I've found in the halls is there's generally something that's their gambling of choice. So whether it's a slot machine or lottery, it's all as bad, and everyone. The thing that happens is they can't put it down. They just can't stop. So whether it's a lottery ticket or betting with the bookie or betting on our devices now, doesn't really matter. It's all the same thing.
Okay. And we have a lot of adolescents. The hospitals are filled right now, like I said earlier, from Boston to Springfield, with 14 years of age and up. You have to be 21 to gamble. Do you know how these 14-year-olds, if there's families watching us tonight and they're realizing like that their children are, like they're missing money, they're acting weird, how did a 14-year-old start gambling? What is his access if you have to be 21 to, you guys, can you speak to that?
So I was gambling at 13. The whole proliferation of gambling, the access of gambling now, and having your device, your ability to gamble from your phone, right? And I mentioned I had to get to a payphone to place a bet. Right. And that means you have to put money in the payphone, and somebody has to be available. Someone might be on it. So access is a big deal. Yep. As far as the age group, kids, they gamble. There's high school basketball games going on tonight. Okay. With certainty, there are kids betting on the outcome of that game, so they can bet amongst themselves. The FanDuel and the DraftKings.
That's what I wanted to talk
I'm not
about.
Here to denounce gambling.
Yep.
I want to be really clear about that.
Yep.
I live in Foxborough.
Yep.
They were going to bring the casino to Foxborough. I'm a pro-business person, and people were saying, how could you want the casino? Like, I'm a free will person. If you want to drink, drink. If you want to gamble, gamble. Yep. I do think there should be limitations with access. Yep. And the glorification of gambling that's gone on with the celebrity poker is really how it started. And now we're seeing the athletes who are, you know, that they're held up on a pedestal. They're in higher regard. Kids respect them. Yep. And they're watching their behavior and their promotion of gambling. And they're young minds, and they can be manipulated. And that's what's going on. And nobody can predict the outcome of an event before it happens. It's impossible. Right. And as far as the money that we talked about, I mean, I've talked to plenty of parents over the years, and they recognize that their son, for the most part, it's the son, and maybe now there's women that are gambling with more frequency. I have a friend that was saying he can't believe his niece is gambling, that she even knows how to gamble. Right? How does she even know how to handicap an NFL game, an over, an under, a favorite, a dog?
Yeah, see, I know none of that.
Right, and by the way, that's a gift. You don't need to know that language. Okay. Jay mentioned playing cards. So I gambled predominantly on sports and blackjack, but I don't even know how to play poker. Right. You know, and I don't need to know how to play poker. Like, I'm not looking to teach somebody how to handicap an NFL game. Yep. Because you should just enjoy the game.
And can you enjoy the sports that you once gambled on?
Fortunately, I can. I've been able, when I made my decision to enter the program, I made the decision that I was going to be done. And that I was going to start working on a better version of myself. I was fortunate. My friend, who was my gambling buddy, happened to walk into the GA program 8 months prior to me making that commitment. And what happened was he called me on a Wednesday morning in February of 21, and he said, guess what I did last night? And I said, what'd you do? And he said, I went to a GA program. And I said to him, good for you. And he said, you know, I really liked what I heard. He goes, I could really relate to everything they were saying. He said, there's another meeting tonight. I think I'm going to go to that meeting. I said, you should, which he did. And what happened was, on a daily basis, our conversations went from gambling and handicapping and that to his recovery. Nice. So this went on for 8 months prior to me making the decision that went in to go into the program. And that first morning, he read the 20 questions to me that you just read. And I instinctively answered yes to every single question. And I finished by saying, hi, I'm JP, I'm a compulsive gambler. And for whatever reason, those 20 questions were so powerful that I stopped sports betting that morning. I happened to bet 3 times at the track in the next 8 months. And what happened was, the last day I had bet the Breeders' Cup on November 6th. I went to Seabrook. I bet every single race, which was unusual because usually I would sit there and handicap as it goes. I bet all 10 races, put the tickets in my pocket, and left. My girlfriend and I had plans for the day, so we were out doing our thing, and of course I'm on my device checking how I did. I happened to hit the first 2 races. So in my mind, I had half of the money back that I had invested the day before. And what I've learned from the program is once you do get clean from a bet, if you have the desire to bet or something, pick up the phone and call somebody. So as I was heading down 95 to go to Seabrook to cash those 2 tickets, I made the best move I've ever made without even realizing it. I called my gambling buddy. And I tried to explain to him that I was going to go take that money that I won and invest it into a football game, even though I hadn't bet for 8 months, and that I had won that money back. And I kept saying I won X amount, and he said, you didn't win, you lost. And I said, no, I won. And that's how we're wired. That's how we think.
Yes.
We come up with any reason and any excuse to justify our action.
Absolutely.
So he's never, ever spoke badly to me. He's never raised his voice. We get along so well. He's screaming at me on the phone, and he hung up on me. And I walked into Seabrook that morning, and the place was buzzing. Everybody was betting. It was a November morning, football morning. And I got this really weird feeling. I felt very, very gross. I was like, wow, this is really bad. And I looked around and I judged everybody. I said, this is a bunch of losers in here. And fortunately for me, before I sat down and read the lines and decided what I was going to put that money in and cash those tickets, I went to the bathroom. And when I went to the bathroom, I'm washing my hands. I looked up in the mirror and I said, no, you're the loser. And at that point, I made my decision. So I walked to the counter. I cashed my 2 tickets. I put the money in my pocket. I went to the meeting that Tuesday night, first meeting. At that point, I called my son 2 days later. And I said to him, hey, Joe, I've made a decision. I'm going to go to GA. I'm going to quit betting. And he gave me the best advice that I could have ever got. He said, you know, if you're going to quit betting, Dad, and you're really serious about it, you might want to come clean and let your girlfriend know. Because she had no idea. That's how easy it is to hide.
How do you hide stuff like that from?
It's so simple.
Beat him to the mailbox.
Yeah, whatever it is. You know, one guy said in the meeting, I had 3 addresses. Who does that? And I thought, I had more than one address. I had a credit card statement that went to another one. Check that box.
Well,
you know? So for me, once I committed and I told her, I knew the way she was going to be nothing but supportive. But now it was game on. There was no talking and not doing anything about it. And I started my journey in the meetings. And I was fortunate because I had gotten an 8-month Reader's Digest version of what the program was from my gambling buddy because he had been in the program 8 months.
Awesome.
So I knew it was more than just putting the bet down. It was an opportunity for me to make myself the best version possible of myself by working those steps and working the recovery program. And when I first went in, I remember going in and I'd see someone like Ken sitting there, and on my way home, I would go to the meeting in Canton, Mass. I live up in Concord, New Hampshire. I had a 90-mile ride after the meeting. That's how committed I was. And I'd call my girlfriend and we'd be talking on the phone. I go, I don't get it. I don't understand why he's there. He's got 25 years free. And for 8 weeks, every week, I don't get it. I don't get it. And then the 8th week, I called her, and the first thing I said, I go, I got it. And she goes, what'd you get? I go, I know why they're there. And she goes, why are they there? I go, because that's where they're supposed to be.
Amen.
And from there, it's just been a great journey. I went from 1 meeting to several meetings a week, like you just spoke about. I got involved. I started running the meeting. I did that for a year.
Awesome.
So then it wasn't, oh, am I going to the meeting tonight or not? I didn't have a choice. I had to open the door and lock the door. And that really kind of, giving back, that really kind of kicked my recovery into a whole different level.
And New Hampshire has a pretty big networking of gambling as well, correct?
It's everywhere.
Yeah, but meetings.
No, actually not. There's a meeting in Manchester that I don't think, what happened was when I went to the Canton meeting, my buddy who had introduced me to the program was running the meeting. So I felt safe when I walked through the door. And I happened to work in sales on the road, and I worked down on the South Shore. That was my area. So the meeting was there. It was convenient. I said, I'll do my work, I'll go to the meeting, and then I'll head home. And that's what's been going on for 2.5 years. That particular meeting in Canton has anywhere from 25 to 40 people every week. Most of the meetings I go to probably have 12 or 15 people in the room. So that's a larger meeting, at least to my experience.
So if I had people in this area, Merrimack Valley, southern New Hampshire, they have to drive as far out to where you folks are for meetings?
No, there's meetings on the North Shore.
There are meetings on the North
Yeah,
Shore.
there's
okay.
a meeting tonight in North Andover.
Awesome.
So when we finish, I'm going to go over and I'll sit in that room tonight.
And also, if there are people that are listening tonight that might need assistance, how would they find that meeting? They just go on the internet and,
Yep.
and just say,
Gamblers Anonymous, is it .org or .com?
I'm not sure, but I know Steve just Googled
Yeah.
Gamblers Anonymous.
that he had a problem with gambling, and the 20 questions popped up
Nice.
for him. He read the 20 questions. He was sitting in his car, and then he saw that there was a meeting in Canton, which was a mile from his house.
Wow.
And he said, well, maybe this is meant to be, and he went to that first meeting.
Wow. And at these meetings, are they men and women? Are they just men's meetings?
They're both.
They're both.
Yeah, there's, it's predominantly men, although over the past 25 years I've seen a lot more women. That East Boston meeting, it used to be all men.
Okay.
And so probably if you were to put a percentage on it, it's probably 60, 40, 70, 30
And
in
what
favor.
about young kids? Do you allow young
Yeah,
14-year-olds?
any age. Yeah, there's
Really?
no limitation. The youngest that I've seen in the halls is 16. The young guy that's been coming. He
Yeah.
was coming with his parents for a little while. And so you brought up a point. Those 20 questions are invaluable.
Yep.
What freed me up, and I've shared this with Jay, at the very bottom it says if you answer 7 or more yes, you
Yeah.
might be a compulsive gambler.
Okay.
And I was trying to hang out near that number,
Yep.
and I was a solid 10 or 12. But one of the big challenges is just being honest,
Yep.
right? So when I answer those questions honestly, I'm 19 and a half yeses out of 20. Question 20 is a two-part question. It says, have you ever self-destructed? Which I was. I was
Yep.
imploding. And the second half says, have you ever attempted to take your life?
Yeah.
So it's the only question that I can answer no to, and it's half a yes and half of a no.
Yep.
But question 7 and question 8 are the two most liberating, or were the two most liberating for me.
Okay.
And I'll paraphrase. 7, when you gambled and lost, did you need to return and try to win your money back?
Yep.
That was a yes for me.
Every time.
And it sounds like the same question, but question 8 is when you gambled and you won, did you need to return and try to win more?
Yeah.
And that's the challenge that most addicts face.
Yeah.
Because you can go on a run and you can win, and you can go on a run and you can lose.
Right.
So it's never enough.
Yeah.
And fortunately for both of us, we just came to the point where we said we need help.
Awesome.
And Gamblers Anonymous is it's a program. There's help and there's hope. And I didn't think there was either, when I got involved.
And then two things, because I wanted to speak to you, because one of you wrote about AWOL
Yes.
for recovery.
Yes.
That was you. I want to
Yes.
jump on that in a minute. But you had said something in regards to you thought you were ahead, and then you realized that you weren't ahead.
No, I was convinced I had won money that day.
Right?
When I didn't win money, I was, no matter what, and that's why I was going back to try to get that. And I kept trying to convince him, and he kept saying, no, bro, that's not right. And
Right.
he got so upset with me because I was trying to convince him that he actually hung up on me. And that stuck with me because
Right.
that had never happened before. When he read the 20 questions to me that first morning, I answered yes to 19 of them instinctively.
Right.
I knew I've been doing this for 40 years.
Wow.
The night that Kenny came in and shared at our meeting, and he shared what he just talked about, question 7 and question 8, I went, that just made the whole thing click for me, because it didn't matter whether I lost or won, I wanted more all the time.
Right.
One guy in the room once said, I'm a more monster, and when he said that, I want more, 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 I went, wow, that's me.
Okay.
So being in those rooms and hearing these stories enables you to reflect. It enables you to distinguish whether that is relevant to you, and in most cases it is. And we're all the same. We're all cut from the same cloth. Someone will say we're not wired right. That's why we think that way. And when I mentioned about being able to hide it, one of the first things I said to Steve that morning, and I don't know how it came to me, I said, this disease is really dirty. I said, it's so easy to hide. You don't look weathered. You don't look from alcohol or drugs. You can hide this so easy. They don't know on Thanksgiving afternoon when I'm with the family that I have a big play-in, and I'm sitting there, and the problem is I'm not present. I'm just focused on my play. I'm not present and enjoying the moment with my family, and that's really the addiction part. And going back to the young kids, since I've been going in 2.5 years, I can't tell you how many young kids we see coming in.
Wow.
And in most cases, the parents are bringing them in, and we try to share with them. You need to be honest with yourself, and you need to come. It's great that they've showed you this, but it's really up to you. You have to decide. Until you decide, you're going to struggle with this.
And do you see a lot of scratch tickets as
it's a big one.
It is? Okay.
Yeah, so if 10 people walked into a Gamblers Anonymous hall today for the first time, and I would have put a percentage on it, this is loose, I would say close to 60% are scratching tickets.
No kidding.
And yeah, scratchies is a big one. And then you can, the horse racing, dog racing, Keno, cards, lottery, that's all, sports gambling, that's all part of, the other percentage.
Okay.
Stock market, big one.
Yeah, I don't know how
Big
to do
one.
that. So for my own personal self, like obviously I'm an alcoholic in recovery, but I would go to the store and I would use my debit card and I would get scratch ticket here, scratch ticket there.
Entertainment, recreation, that's good, that's fun.
Yes, and I would do it. However, I needed to look at my bills and my finances and I had to write everything out. So I went through my statements. And when I saw what I spent in 1 month on scratch tickets, I nearly vomited. It was enough to make a payment for something and I went, oh my gosh, like thank you that I can have that awareness. If I didn't sit down and look, I would have been in total denial that that's what I was spending each month. So it really opened my eyes to it and I could see how it happens. And then I have the scratch ticket, like people that win. Oh, well, I won X amount. And it's like, but how much did you spend to get that? So you really didn't. So I totally understand that whole high and everything. And I didn't know if it was a big in GA
Very
in regards to, because you keep saying the sporting thing and that stuff goes over my head. Like when they talk about fantasy football, I don't know if that's part of gambling.
Sure.
I know nothing about fantasy football in any way, shape, or form. So I was just curious about the scratch tickets.
One of the first meetings I attended, the gentleman was a lottery scratch ticket, and I'll never forget, he said he would take the tickets, he'd be out in his car, and I've seen people do it. They'd scratch, and if they win, they run right back in. And he would take the newspaper when someone came by, and he'd pull the newspaper up like he was reading the newspaper. And this is an older gentleman that had been in the program for almost nine years. Another gentleman spoke about when he went in to buy his ticket, the guy behind the counter called him number 17 because that was the ticket he bought every time. He didn't even know his name. And when he quit buying and he would go into that store, the clerk behind the counter questioned him why he wasn't buying tickets anymore. But he had discovered the program and he had put the bet down. So it doesn't matter whether it's lottery tickets, it doesn't matter if it's sports betting. We talk about sports betting because that was our gambling of choice. And with it being legalized now and legal in 38 states, it's from what I read recently, it's $126 billion bet legally last year.
Whoa.
So when Ken and I bet, we had to bet with the bookie. So I had from 6:30 to 7:30 to get my bet in. At 7:30 it was shut off. When we came out of COVID and I was still betting, I was literally up in my bed putting plays in on Korean baseball at 2 in the morning because it was the only thing that I could bet on. I didn't know anything about Korean baseball. So it had to do with the action,
Absolutely.
And I tell that story because that's how scary these devices are and the accessibility that they have to making that bet. The other challenge with the bookie was we would get a limit that we could use for the week, or they'd allow us to bet so much or whatever. You'd be due after Sunday. your week was done, you owe it on Thursday, and all of a sudden on Monday you got that limit set up again.
Yeah.
And as many times as I said, I'm done, I'm never doing this again,
Yeah.
by Monday night, I'm looking at lines and I'm putting it in because maybe I can win the money back so I don't have to pay him on Thursday.
Wow.
And when Kenny ever read questions 7 and 8 and explained it that night, I went, oh my God, that's it in a nutshell right there. Never enough.
You were
Doesn't
saying
matter.
about people were in their car and the gentleman would take the newspaper. Every morning I stop and I get gas, or not every morning, but the mornings that I do go, there's a gentleman there and he's there all the time. And I went into the store to get a scratch ticket and I said, oh, I'll take whatever number it was. And the woman behind the counter said, no, he's playing that role. And I was like, what? And he was next to me and he's like, yeah, I'm playing that. I'm like, yeah, you can't do that, you know? And I was just like, and then I felt bad because he's there every time I'm there. And I feel as though that we should have 800, like stickers to say, if there's a gambling problem, like to give an 800 number, like I wanted to give him my business card to say like, I don't know where I'd get them, but I know I'd reach out to someone like the two of you to say, I have a gentleman that's gambling, like where do I direct him? Because to sit there for hours on edge and just go over and over and just scratch and scratch and think, you know, and then I watch the ATM slips, you know, the 120, the 120, the 100. It's always 120 and it's like, what? So you justify the 50 for that scratch ticket and then you have the cash and then sometimes it's the next day. It's just, it is a definite crazy crazy
it's
addiction.
insidious.
It is, and like you said, one of you had said earlier, like it's not like you wear it. Like if I'm an alcoholic, I might be a little loud and gruff, and you might smell it on me. Or an addict might be, you know, strung out. Like we'll see it, but for gambling, it's like you have no idea. You have no idea that you're not paying attention to me at Thanksgiving because you're in your head going,
what's my next play?
Yep.
My girlfriend knew I gambled.
She did?
She knew I gambled.
Yep.
She went to Saratoga with me one weekend. She had no idea I was a compulsive gambler. And when I came clean to her, it was really a surprise to her.
Right.
And that's what that disease is. You know, if it, you know, in a lot of cases it will affect you financially. So over time, it's going to happen.
Did you lose anything? Like I've heard of people who have lost businesses.
I lost relationships and I lost respect from my own children because of it. They knew I was a degenerate gambler. 100%.
All right.
Yep.
And when you say it that way, how did they know? Did you ever not provide for them or miss something for them because of your gambling? You were not able to provide?
Well, I had one instance when my son was a young adult. He had moved back home and we were working together and we ended up getting an apartment together. And one of the things he said to me, he said, Dad, I'll get a place with you. Just never be late on the rent. And for him to say that, right? Don't come to tell me you don't have the rent. So we're in our...
And you're the father, right?
And I'm the dad, right? He's telling me. So we're in our second year of the lease, and I come to him prior to that month and say, Joe, I don't get the money this month. And I'm telling you, that was not a good conversation. And I think he's held that to this day. As far as a respect thing, you know, and it was really, really not good.
That's humbling.
It was super humbling.
Yeah.
You know, and I think he's proud of the fact that I'm doing something about it now, and it's been 2+ years. But yeah, that's, who does that? They don't do that.
Right. And so can we jump to that you said an
AWOL?
Yeah. Can you elaborate as to what that might is? Is that a class? Is that?
Yeah, it's intensive 12-step study.
Okay.
So AWOL is a military term, absent without leave.
Okay.
In a recovery term, it's another way of life.
Okay.
AWOL. And you chronologically go through the steps. And
is there a time frame like you sign?
Well, no. There's probably 15 to 20 keys per step.
Okay.
So the 2 that I have lived were a year long.
Okay.
There's 2 requirements. There's a clean requirement, and there's an attendance requirement.
Okay.
Whereas normal, you come and go with meetings, right? You come in when it's voluntary. With the AWOL, if you have an excused absence, like business travel, sickness, legitimate. But if you you gamble is our term for using too, right? Or using is our term for gambling. If you pick up, you're out.
Okay.
But people, it's an honor system. You know, people can lie about it. And usually you start with a number that gets cut in half.
Okay.
Step 4 loses a lot of people.
And can you tell us what step 4 is?
Yeah, step 4 is when you write out an inventory of where the addiction has brought you.
Okay.
When you started, like chronologically, I was able to go back to the age of 13 when I wrote out my step 4. And I remember when I was 10, the Red Sox lost the 1975 World Series. And as a fan, I was crushed. I had no idea if people were winning and losing on that event.
Okay.
And so that's how in my mind, how I go back. 13 was different. And I wasn't doing the damage at 13 that I was doing at 23 and 33. I didn't have access.
Okay.
So I wrote about 37 pages. And the day came that my sponsor came to the house. It took me about 3 weeks to write out my step 4. And I used the 7 deadly sins as a guide. I wrote about those 20 questions, questions 7 and 8, where that's how they jumped off the page for me.
Is there a format for the AWOL?
There's not. There's not. So there's a format for the AWOL, but a step 4. There's 4th step recovery guides.
Okay.
And then there's, I facilitated an AWOL, and then I also participated in one. It's the first one I participated in and learned, and then I was able to co-facilitate one. So when I wrote out my 4th step, the day came that my sponsor was going to come to the house and I was going to read it back to him. Step 5 is when you read your step 4 to God and another human being. And I had 2 fears. If my wife finds my step 4, she's out of here. And my other fear was if I die and she finds my step 4, it's my legacy. So I had a lot of incentive to give it away. And the day that I gave my 4 away, my sponsor came to the house. It took me about 3 hours to read it all over to him. And I remember ripping it up and destroying it. Some people keep their 4, not me. And I was not vindicated that day. I was guilty of all of it. I was liberated that day. I was on the 2nd floor of my house. Same house we live in today. My sponsor had left, and for the first time in my compulsive gambling life, 13 to 33, it became okay that I lost what I lost. It became okay that I couldn't do it anymore, and it became okay that I was not going to get my money back, and I could treat the losses like a death, and it was okay. You know?
Whoa! Treat your losses like a death. Mourn them.
Yeah, gone.
Wow.
You know? Well, they weren't coming back.
Yeah. No kidding.
And I wasn't owed the money back. And a lot of people get trapped, especially the young kids, because their mind can't get around it. They think, you know what, I'll stop gambling when I'm a little older, but I'm young enough, I can recover, I'm having fun right now.
Right.
And
I'm having fun because I live with my parents and they're taking care of me. And then yet we have 18-year-olds taking their lives because they are gambling and their parents have no idea. Absolutely.
Yeah, the parents that are listening, if you think that paying off the debt is the solution, that's the simple solution. The real solution is get to a Gam-Anon meeting and get in front of people that love the compulsive gambler, and they're in another room talking about, okay, how do we handle this?
Right.
Versus just trying to figure it out on your own. And the obvious solution, which is not the solution, is paying the bookmaker off or paying the debt off, because
but if they're
you break even.
Your child.
So bookmakers want to get paid if they're. So the likelihood of somebody getting hurt, a young kid, and I'm not saying tempt it, but I am saying there's other resolutions. Okay. And the resolution, if you pay something off, now you give someone an opportunity to run it up again. Yep. And that's what happens because they didn't address the problem. Right. And the Gamblers Anonymous, there's a lot of really smart people in those halls that have suffered, and that can help. You know, that know how to address it. That the father and the mother, they're too close to the action. Yep. And so if they can consult somebody that's dealt with it before. And then, you know, you mentioned something that was a really good point. You can't convince or convert somebody.
Yep.
And so that person that was gambling, you know, whether it's the newspaper who has a shame, or the guy that was in front of you and you were going to play what he was going to play, like, to give that person an opportunity to say, hey, you know what, there's help. They don't want to hear it.
Right.
Right? So the whole concept of recruiting and convincing and converting, it's deaf ears.
Yeah.
The last person I wanted to talk to when I was gambling was my wife about my gambling.
Right.
Yeah.
So finish on the AWOL, because you just said you did a 4 and 5.
So I did a 4 and 5. So you chronologically go through them 1 through 12.
Yep.
And each AWOL I lived lasted a year.
Okay.
And we started with each AWOL with about 30, and we ended with about 14 or 15.
And you said the only requirements is if you
Clean.
relapse, you're out, and your attendance. So does someone have to have like a year before you allow them to come in? Is there a time
Nope.
frame? Should they have 30 days?
Nope,
And
they
do you
just have to
see
be
any of
clean
the
when they come in.
children, any of our adolescents, are they welcomed into an AWOL?
Yes.
They are.
They're encouraged.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think what happens with that is when they start attending the meeting and they see that it's more than just putting the bet down,
Yep.
and that they start looking at themselves and they discover that those steps,
Yep.
because people will say that. I remember a gentleman kept saying, you got to get a sponsor, you got to work these steps.
Yep.
It took me almost a year and a half before I finally found somebody that I asked, and I actually had called Ken prior to that, and he said, you know, I think it might be better if you had somebody that was in your meetings that was closer.
Yep.
I happened to go to another meeting, I heard somebody say something that resonated with me, I kept going, and about 5 months later, I randomly called him and I said, hey, would you help sponsor me?
Yep.
And then I started working the steps, and the key with the steps is, step number 1 is the one you have to practice 100%.
Yep.
You have to tell yourself you're powerless over gambling and not bet for anything. That's where it all starts. That one you have to perfect. The rest of those you start to work, and they're in chronicle order, and you work those steps. And when you get to step 4, that's usually the hardest, because now you're writing an inventory of why you did what you did, and it's really scary.
Right.
And then you're going to share it with another human being, even more scary. And one of the things that helped for me was, when I got ready and as I was writing out my step 4, my sponsor just kept saying to me, listen, when I did my step 5, the guy that I did it with said to me, nothing you're going to tell me is going to shock me. In other words, he had heard it all before.
Yeah.
So that kind of put me at ease. And for me, I was fortunate. I went to his house, made a nice dinner for me. We sat there for three hours. I shared my step 4 with him. He took notes, he shared, we interjected. I was probably there about 3 or 4 hours. Like Kenny said, it was suggested to me to burn that when I was done, and that's what I did.
Nice.
And I got through that, and now it's like, okay, now I got to start looking at other things. So step 6 talks about character defects.
Yep.
And when that was read the first time I heard it in a meeting, I was like shocked, because all of those character defects that were in that step was me.
Can you give like an example of what
Oh my God, how about
defect?
procrastination?
Okay.
You know, anger.
Okay.
There's 36 of them that happen to be listed in the book.
Okay.
But I could have checked all 36, and all my thought was, wow, I got a lot of work to do. and I really felt that. And to this day, I'll hear people say that step is scary to people, but that one's about progress. That's not perfection.
Okay.
That's something that we need to be working on all the time and recognize when we have these issues.
Okay.
One of the first ones I wanted to work on was anger. You know, why do I get mad when someone does something on the road, driving wise, or for whatever reason? There's got to be a reason to that.
Did you figure it out?
I'm still working on that one. I'm not sure that, you know, and again, you're looking for progress.
Yep.
The fact that I recognize it, and then I say, why did I do that? You know what I mean? Let me get better and not do it the next time. Procrastination, that's a huge one. I told a story. Why do I let my gas tank go all the way down to the end before I go to fill it up? That's just procrastination. And I'm literally praying that I get to the gas station.
Right.
That's like really weird. And I remember when I'd run out of gas, my father saying to me one day, he goes, I don't understand why you run out of gas. He goes, you have a gas gauge, But that's just, it's almost like a game.
Right.
You know,
Am
I can
gonna
get to
make
the
it?
end. I
Am
can get
gonna
all
make
those
it?
miles.
Or am I
It's
gonna run out?
gambling,
It's a game.
right?
It is.
Gambling.
It's being in action. And that was the
Right.
point I wanted to make. It had nothing to do with the money. It's
Yep.
about being in action.
Okay.
And that's why for a compulsive person, once you put that play in,
Yep.
once you decide you're going to go down to the end of the tank,
Yep.
now you're in action and the dopamine starts to hit you.
Okay.
So I noticed last fall we're at the apple orchard on a Sunday afternoon, and I'm walking with my girlfriend holding her hand, and I'm like present, and I'm like, this is where I'm supposed to be getting that dopamine,
Yep.
that hit, not from having a play-in on the football game.
Right.
You have your priorities really messed up.
Right, absolutely. And then for adolescents to go through, now did you do an AWOL as well, or you
I
just?
haven't yet, and it's something that I want to do. We've talked about it.
So you literally went through
I'm
the steps
in the
through
process
a meeting?
of working those steps.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you said that there was 36 of the,
Character defects.
so is that in like a book?
Yep.
Okay, so there is a
In the
book that you
step
do
book that we
follow.
follow. Every meeting we're on a different step.
All right.
And each meeting could be a different step depending on where they are in the meeting.
Okay.
The 12th step is giving back
Yep.
to the program. That's why we sit here tonight. That's why I ran that meeting for a year.
Right.
I didn't have a choice whether I was going to the meeting on Tuesday night or not. I had to be there because I made that commitment.
Right.
I had 30 people counting on me every week, and I did that for a full year.
Wow.
So that's giving back. That's that step 12 work.
That's awesome. That's pretty cool. And do you, either one of you know how many people like have recovered? Like AA has 1 billion of people that have recovered, and do you have any kind of idea of what type of?
Yeah, I don't have the metrics. I know that my sponsor's coming up on 60 years clean on July
Amen.
4th, 6-0.
Amen.
I know that it was started in 1957, Gamblers Anonymous,
Yep.
and Gamblers Anonymous owes a debt of gratitude to Alcoholics Anonymous because
Right.
that started in the 30s.
Yep.
And so two gentlemen were getting together in California, and they were realizing when they would meet and talk about their gambling problem that they were abstaining,
Okay.
you know, and so that was the start of it.
Awesome.
And so I don't have the numbers. I know we're just much smaller.
Okay.
As Jay mentioned, an average meeting for us is 15 people.
That's awesome.
And we joke all the time that if all the people that needed this program were here, we'd need to have it at a stadium.
Yeah.
100%.
And do you notice at these meetings that a lot of individuals suffer from addiction in regards to alcohol and drugs?
100%.
But both of you do not. Both of you are able to be normal drinkers and normal everything else. It was just the gambling that affected your life?
So I'll speak to that. So do I think that I've ever crossed the line into alcoholism? I do not. Do I
Okay.
think I've ever crossed the line into drug addiction? I do not. Do I think I could? Absolutely.
Okay.
I think once you're an addict, the likelihood of being dually and triply and quadruply addicted
Yep.
is there.
Okay.
Because we have this proclivity of more.
Right.
You know,
Yep,
the more
I want
monster.
more.
Yep.
Excess, never enough.
Right.
And so that whole concept of putting down a drink and picking up a bet,
Yep.
putting down a bet and picking up a drug,
Yep.
it's very real.
So how would you how would you talk to like a kid who's coming into, he doesn't want to gamble, and would you address the idea of watch your other addictions, especially their
Definitely.
brains are growing until the age of 25, so they're not the smartest tools in the shed to begin with, and they're going for those hits, and so do you see a lot of the kids come in already addicted to drugs and alcohol and gambling, or just mainly just gambling?
I think so. I think what happens is that once you start going to those meetings, you start to reflect and you notice things that maybe you didn't notice before.
Okay.
So you could be compulsive to buying, you could be compulsive to running up a credit card, you could be compulsive to sex, it could be anything.
Yep.
And I think once you start attending and listening, and I want to say that I think the biggest thing for me was I went there with intention. I was there to learn. I wasn't there just because someone told me I had to go.
Okay.
So all of a sudden I start recognizing these other things, and I'm like, holy cow, you can be compulsive to skiing, biking, sports. It doesn't matter. Work is a huge one.
Okay.
You know, and I know where part of my compulsion came from, because I have a father that works harder than anybody else that I know. So my choice just happened to be gambling, which is very, very bad. And you find ways of justifying it. You find ways of hiding it. If anything, from what I hear from others, it's the hardest one for them to kick if there is a dual addiction. And one of the things they always say is meetings make it. Meetings with an S, not one meeting. You go to meetings, and then you start hearing. And what happened for me was, I would review what happened in the meeting with my girlfriend, or call my buddy right after the meeting. We'd talk about what we heard. Well, we couldn't remember a lot of it, so I started writing notes.
Nice.
And now on my phone, I've gathered over 700 notes in the last year. And at time for time, I'll just go and I'll look at those notes, and I might say to him, hey, pick a number. He could say 299, and I'll look at the note and I'll read it, and there's some sort of an impact. And it could have came from him, it could have come from somebody else. But for me, that's how I've worked the program.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
Great.
So we're coming towards the end, and I want you two to really speak to the audience in regards to, you know, whether you're young, old, whatever your age is. If you're struggling with gambling, if you answered 7 out of these 20 questions, what would one individual do? Who would be the first person they called?
I mean, the Gamblers Anonymous hotline.
Do you know that number?
So no, I don't know it off the top of my head, but you can, if with Dr. Google, you can Google anything.
Okay,
and
and
Google,
just Gamblers
Anonymous, and there's
hotline.
chapters in all 50 states.
Okay.
And so you can identify the meeting nearest you. There's someone who will pick up the phone. They have live people, like GA members, man the phones. And then they can direct people, you know, what meeting they should go to.
Okay.
I would get a phone call during the week from a member, and he'd say, hey, I spoke to this person today. He told me he's going to show up. Keep your eye out for him. And that's the other thing that happens. When you walk through that hall, people are really scared. They don't feel comfortable. And I've never met a group of more people, more gracious, more welcoming than that. And that's the reason my friends kept going back, was because he felt welcome that first night. And I remember him saying to me, he goes, get there early, come in early. He goes, that's the best part of the meeting. You get the banter. So I showed up at 7:15 because I'm always early for a 7:30 meeting. Stayed in my car till 7:29. Walked in the room. I said, I'm not here to meet any friends. I don't need friends. I got plenty of those. Sat in the back like this and listened. And to this day, after running the meeting and going to more meetings and meetings, I can say I have close to 70 names in my phone. I call people down in Florida that are there for the winter just randomly to see how they're doing. And that's how that fellowship works, is that there's support there, there's hope. And you don't recognize that unless you keep going back and you have your ears open and you're honest, you want it. You gotta wanna give it up. That's the whole key.
That's awesome.
You can't do it for somebody else.
Absolutely not. Well, I can't thank you two enough for driving your distance, both of you. I know you came from New Hampshire and you from Foxborough. And to me, this was a very powerful evening of learning about this, but witnessing miracles sitting in front of me in regards to that, you know, you put it down, you surrendered, and you're out there carrying a message of hope. So I thank you both for being here tonight.
Thank you for having us.
And if there's anyone out there that's struggling and listening, please reach out to me. I'll give you their phone numbers.
Happy to take it.
And we'll just get you on the right way, because you can give up the high cost of low living and you can surrender to whatever addiction it is. So thank you all for being with us here tonight. I look forward to seeing you next month with another show with Phil and I. And until then, if no one told you they loved you today, I love you. Good night and God bless.
Thank you, Cole.
Thank you.